The trail was right there on the map when we started hiking that morning. Wide and clear, well-maintained, exactly what you would expect from a family-friendly loop in the Blue Ridge foothills. But 35 minutes in, we found a fork that should not have existed. A second trail, branching off into trees that were darker and older than anything around them, leading into a silence so complete it felt like the forest itself was holding its breath. We followed it. Just for 20 minutes, I told my wife. We would turn back if it did not go anywhere. That was 2 years ago, and I still cannot explain what happened inside those trees. The trail behind us vanished. The forest would not let us leave. My phone, my wife's phone, both frozen at the exact same time, as if the place we had entered existed outside of time entirely. We got out. At least I think we did. But some nights, I feel something beneath the house, a deep, slow rhythm, like a heartbeat underground, and I realize that whatever we walked into that day, it did not stay in the mountains. It followed us home. And I do not think it is finished. I need to talk about what happened to my family on the second weekend of October, 2 years ago. I have gone back and forth about whether to share this, mostly because I know how it sounds. But I also know that if I stay quiet, somebody else might find that trail, and if they do, they might not come back the way we did. My name is Daniel Coburn, and at the time, I was 34 years old, living just outside Roanoke, Virginia, with my wife Megan and our 2 kids, Sophie and James. Sophie was 11 and James was 8. We were not an outdoorsy family by any real standard. Most of our weekends involved soccer games and grocery runs and the kind of low-key chaos that comes with raising 2 kids on 2 mid-range salaries. But that October, Megan had been pushing for us to do something different. She had read about a scenic area in the Blue Ridge foothills, a place called Harmon Hollow, that had a network of easy loop trails, family-friendly stuff, nothing technical. She showed me the website. It had pictures of fiery red maples and a gentle creek crossing, and families posing on flat rocks with big smiles. It looked safe. It looked like exactly the kind of thing a family like ours could handle without anyone getting hurt or miserable. We drove up on a Saturday morning, early enough that the fog was still sitting low in the valleys. The drive was about 2 hours, mostly highway, then a long stretch of narrow 2-lane road that curled through farmland and eventually climbed into the hills. We passed a few old houses, a church with no sign, a gas station that looked like it had been closed for a decade. The kids were in the back seat watching something on a tablet, and Megan was navigating from her phone. When we got to the parking area, there were maybe 4 or 5 other cars already there. That was reassuring. A wooden kiosk near the trailhead had a large printed map under plexiglass, and I studied it carefully. There were 3 marked loops. The shortest was 1.5 miles. The longest was just under 5. Megan wanted to do the middle one, a 3-mile loop called Ridgeline Trail, which went up through hardwood forest, crossed a small ridge, and looped back down along a creek. I took a photo of the map on my phone, and we set off. The first 20 minutes were beautiful. The trail was well maintained, wide enough for us to walk 2 abreast, with packed dirt and the occasional wooden step built into steeper sections. And the leaves were turning, and every few minutes Sophie would pick one up and hold it against the light, pointing out the veins and the way the color faded from red to gold. James ran ahead, as he always did, darting back to us every 30 seconds to report on what he had seen around the next bend. A mushroom the size of his fist, a beetle with green wings, a tree that had fallen across the trail and been cut cleanly by a chainsaw. About 35 minutes in, we reached a fork that was not on the map. I pulled out my phone and looked at the photo I had taken. According to the map, Ridgeline Trail did not fork. It curved left and continued uphill to the ridge. But here in front of us, the trail clearly split. The left branch matched what the map showed, curving uphill and slightly west. The right branch went straight ahead, almost flat, disappearing into a stretch of older trees that were noticeably taller and darker than the forest around us. There was no sign at the fork, no blaze marks on the trees, nothing to indicate the right branch was an official trail. But it was clearly a trail. The ground was worn smooth, not like a game path, but like a trail that had been walked by human feet for a long time. The width was consistent, about 3 feet across, and it was clean of debris, as if someone had recently maintained it. James had already wandered a few steps down the right branch before I called him back. "What's down there?" Megan asked, shielding her eyes from a ray of sun that had cut through the canopy. "I don't know. It's not on the map." "Maybe it's a newer trail they haven't updated the sign for." That sounded reasonable. A lot of trail systems expand incrementally, and printed maps at kiosks do not always keep pace. Megan pointed out that the right branch looked flatter, which would be easier on James, who had been complaining about his ankles on the uphill sections. Sophie was curious. She said the trees down the right branch looked older, and she wanted to see if there were different kinds of mushrooms there. I hesitated, but only briefly. It was a clear day. We had water and snacks, and the terrain was gentle. I figured we would follow it for 15 or 20 minutes, and if it did not loop back, we would simply turn around. That decision is the one I think about every single night. We walked down the right branch, and within 5 minutes, the character of the forest changed completely. The hardwoods gave way to hemlocks, tall and dense, with a canopy so thick the sunlight dropped to almost nothing. The air was cooler by at least 10 degrees, and it carried a smell I did not recognize, something between wet stone and old metal. The trail remained clear and well-defined, but the ground beneath our feet shifted from packed dirt to a kind of dark clay that was slightly soft, like walking on a mat. I checked my phone. No signal, which was not surprising given the hills, but the GPS was also struggling. The blue dot on the map was frozen in place, not updating. I mentioned this to Megan casually, not wanting to alarm the kids. She nodded and said we should keep track of time. I checked my watch. It was 10:47 a.m. We kept walking. The trail did not curve or branch further. It went straight, with a very slight downhill grade through the hemlocks. The silence was the first thing that started to bother me. I do not mean it was quiet. I mean it was silent. No birds, no insects, no wind in the branches. The only sounds were our footsteps and our voices, and even those seemed muted, as if the air itself was absorbing them. When I clapped my hands once, just to test it, the sound was flat and dead. It did not echo, it did not carry, it just stopped. Sophie noticed it too. She moved closer to Megan and stopped talking about mushrooms. "Dad," James said from a few feet ahead, "how come there's no squirrels?" "They're probably deeper in the woods, buddy." "I haven't seen any since we turned." He was right. I had not noticed until he said it. But we had not seen a single animal since taking the right fork. Not a bird, not a squirrel, not even an ant on the trail. The forest was empty. At the 15-minute mark, I stopped and told everyone we should head back. Megan agreed immediately. The kids did not argue. Something about the place had dampened everyone's enthusiasm without anyone needing to name it. We turned around and started walking back the way we had come. 10 minutes later, we had not reached the fork. I checked my watch. We had been walking back for 10 minutes at the same pace we had walked in. We should have been at the fork already. But the trail ahead looked exactly the same as the trail behind us. Straight, flat, hemlocks on both sides, dark clay underfoot. No landmarks, no variation, Nothing to indicate we were making progress in any direction. "Dan," Megan said quietly, pulling me aside while the kids sat on a fallen log, "are we going the right way?" "There's only one way. The trail doesn't branch." We turned around and were walking back. "Then where's the fork?" I did not have an answer. I checked my phone again. The GPS dot had not moved. The time on my phone read 10:47 a.m. I stared at it. We had been walking for at least 40 minutes since I last checked, but my phone said no time had passed. I showed Megan. She looked at her own phone. Hers said 10:47 as well. But my wristwatch, a simple analog with no digital components, read 11:31 a.m. Something cold moved through my chest, and it was not the air temperature. It was the feeling you get when you realize a situation has become something fundamentally different from what you thought it was. "Okay," I said, keeping my voice level. "We keep walking. The trail has to end somewhere. It has to connect back." We walked for another 20 minutes by my watch. The trail did not end. It did not fork. It did not change in any way. The same hemlocks, the same dark clay, the same dead silence. I started looking for any detail I could use as a marker. I found a hemlock with a broken branch at eye level and scratched a line into the bark with my car key. We kept walking. 14 minutes later, we passed the same tree. The scratch was there, fresh and pale against the dark bark. Megan saw it. I saw her see it. Neither of us said anything in front of the kids, but she grabbed my hand and squeezed it so hard I felt the bones shift. We were walking in a straight line on a trail that did not curve, and we had come back to the same spot. That is not possible. I need you to understand that I am not exaggerating or misremembering. I am an engineer. I understand geometry. A straight line does not loop. But we were back at the same tree. I made a decision. I told the family we were going to leave the trail. I picked a direction perpendicular to the trail, what I believed was east, based on the faint glow of the sun through the canopy, and I said we were going to walk through the forest until we hit a road or a creek or some recognizable feature. We stepped off the trail into the hemlocks. The ground off the trail was different. The dark clay ended abruptly at the trail's edge, replaced by normal forest floor, dry leaves and roots and rocks. That was actually encouraging. It meant the trail was a defined thing, and the normal forest was right there beside it. We just had to walk far enough in one direction. We pushed through the trees for about 10 minutes. The forest was still silent, still empty of animals, but the canopy was thinning slightly, and I could see brighter sky ahead. I told the kids we were almost out. James was scared but holding it together. Sophie was quiet, walking close to Megan, her eyes fixed on the ground. Then we stepped out of the hemlocks and onto the trail. The same trail, the same dark clay, the same straight path cutting through the same dark trees. The scratch on the hemlock was 30 feet to our left. Megan sat down on the ground. She did not cry, but her face had gone completely white, and she was breathing in short, shallow bursts. I knelt beside her and held her shoulders and told her we were going to be fine, and I did not believe a single word of it. "Dad." Sophie's voice was very small. "The trees are closer." I looked up. She was right. When we had first walked this section of trail, the hemlocks had been set back from the path by maybe 8 or 10 feet on each side. Now they were closer, maybe 5 feet. Their lowest branches were nearly touching over the trail, and the light had dimmed further. I stood up and made another decision. I told everyone to sit tight, and I walked 50 feet down the trail alone. I wanted to see if anything changed, if there was a bend or an opening or anything at all. I walked slowly, counting my steps, and I kept the family in sight behind me the whole time. At 50 feet, I stopped because I heard something. It was not a voice, not an animal, not wind. It was a low, rhythmic vibration, more felt than heard, like the ground itself was pulsing. It came from below, deep below, and it had a pattern to it. Not mechanical, not natural, organic, like a heartbeat, but impossibly slow. One beat every 10 or 12 seconds. I put my hand on the ground. The clay was warm, not sun warm, body warm. I walked back to the family quickly and told them we were going to try something different. I was not going to walk along the trail or perpendicular to it. I was going to walk backward along it, retracing our steps exactly. But this time I was going to count every single step and refuse to stop for any reason until we either reached the fork or walked a number of steps that exceeded what was physically possible. We started walking. I counted out loud. The kids joined in, which I think helped keep them calm, turning it into something that felt like a game. We counted to 500, and then 1,000, then 1,500. The trail remained straight and unchanging. At step 1,712, Sophie said, "I see light." Ahead of us, the hemlocks ended. I could see bright daylight, golden and warm, and the unmistakable orange and red of autumn hardwoods. We walked faster. The kids started running. Megan was half running, half stumbling beside me. We broke out of the hemlocks and onto the original trail. The fork was right there. The left branch curved uphill toward the ridge. The right branch was behind us, the one we had just emerged from. I turned around to look at it. It was gone. Where the right branch had been, there was nothing. Just forest. Unbroken hemlocks and hardwoods growing densely together with no gap, no path, no indication that a trail had ever existed. I walked to the spot where the fork had been and pushed my hand into the undergrowth. Solid. Branches and trunks and leaves. I would have had to hack through it with a machete. Megan was crying. I was shaking so badly I could barely stand. James was asking what happened, and Sophie was completely silent, staring at the spot where the trail had been with an expression I had never seen on a child's face before. It was not fear. It was comprehension, like she understood something she did not have the words for. We hiked back to the trailhead in 20 minutes without stopping. The parking area was almost empty. Our car and one other were the only ones left. I checked my phone. It had finally updated. The time was 4:58 p.m. We had entered the right branch at approximately 10:50 a.m. We had been in there for over 6 hours. I drove us home. Nobody spoke for the entire 2-hour drive. In the weeks that followed, I tried to make sense of what happened. I went back to the Harmon Hollow website and studied the trail map again. 3 loops. No fork on Ridgeline Trail. I emailed the park management office and asked if there had ever been an unmapped trail branching off Ridgeline. The woman who responded said no, and she had worked there for 18 years. I asked if anyone had ever reported getting lost on that trail. She said no. It was one of the most straightforward trails in the system. I pulled up satellite imagery of the area. I spent hours zooming in on the section of forest where the fork should have been. There was nothing. Unbroken canopy, no clearing, no gap, no path visible from above. I contacted a local hiking group that frequently used Harmon Hollow. I described the fork, the hemlocks, the dark clay, the silence. Nobody recognized any of it. One man who had hiked Ridgeline Trail over 40 times told me there was no fork and there were no hemlocks in that section of the park. He said the entire area was hardwood. I drove back to Harmon Hollow alone on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after our trip. I hiked Ridgeline Trail from start to finish. There was no fork. The trail curved left and went uphill exactly as the map described. I walked slowly, checking every inch of the right side of the trail for any sign of a branching path. There was nothing. At one point, I stopped and stood exactly where I believed the fork had been, based on the timing and the landmarks I remembered. I stood there for 10 minutes, looking into the forest. Hardwoods, normal forest floor, birds singing, a squirrel watching me from a branch. It was like the trail had never existed. I would have started to doubt my own memory if it were not for two things. The first was my family. Megan remembers everything. So do the kids. We have all described the same details independently, down to the color of the clay and the spacing of the hemlocks. 4 people experience the same thing. That is not a hallucination. The second thing is what I found in the car when I got home from our trip. After I pulled into the driveway that evening, I opened the trunk to get our backpack. Sitting on top of it, on the clean fabric of the bag, was a small clump of dark clay. The same clay from the trail. It was still slightly warm. I put it in a plastic bag and set it on a shelf in the garage. By the next morning, it was gone. The bag was still there, sealed, but empty. No residue, no stain, nothing. And there is one more thing I have not told Megan, and I am not sure I ever will. 3 nights after our hike, I woke up at 3 a.m. because I felt a vibration. That same slow, deep, rhythmic pulsing I had felt through the clay on the trail. It was coming from below our house, from deep underground, and it lasted for exactly 60 seconds before it stopped. I lay in bed with my hand pressed flat against the mattress, feeling it, counting the beats. It has happened 4 more times since then, always at 3 a.m., always lasting exactly 60 seconds, always the same rhythm. I do not know what is under that trail. I do not know what we walked into or how we got out. I do not know if getting out was our doing or if something decided to let us go. And I do not know why I can still feel it beneath me, like it is not a place you visit, but a thing that, once it notices you, does not fully let go. If you ever hike in the Blue Ridge foothills and you come to a fork that is not on your map, do not take it. Do not look down it. Do not let your curiosity pull you forward. Turn around and walk back to your car and drive away, because the trail might not be there on the way back. And whatever is underneath it already knows your name. Remember, some places don't want you to leave. Thanks for watching the video.